Hi, I'm Bill Bishop, and I'm the Big Idea Coach. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk about how to become a new factory entrepreneur. And this is all about how to create infinite opportunity for yourself, your business, and your community. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the difference between being an old factory entrepreneur and being a new factory entrepreneur. I'm going to talk about the difference between using old factory thinking and new factory thinking. And what all of the companies we worked with, which are thousands of companies, have found is that old factory thinking is the way that they have been thinking about business for a long time, is very restrictive. It's very limiting. And they start to see that. And they start to see that that is not the way of thinking that's going to help them be more successful. And then they learn new factory thinking and they see how liberating it is, how infinite it is, and how it helps them achieve their full potential. And they get very, very excited. They get all kinds of new ideas they never had before. And they can see that the opportunities in front of them are infinite. So instead of fearing the future, instead of defending the status quo, they let go of the status quo and they embrace the future. So I hope you'll join me here for this presentation called The New Factory Entrepreneur, because I know that if you listen to what I have to say, it's going to completely change how you think about business, and it's going to give you new ideas on how to be infinitely successful in the future. So please join me for this presentation. Thank you. So the questions I have for you are, is your thinking finite or infinite? Is it restrictive or liberating? Is it holding you back or is it helping you achieve your full potential? So that's what I'm going to talk about here is how we're thinking about our business, about ourselves, about the economy, about our future. How do we actually think about that on a fundamental level? And is that actually helpful? And then I'm going to encourage you to start thinking of yourself as a new factory entrepreneur. That's where we're going to go, as opposed to being an old factory entrepreneur, which most of us are right now. Which is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying that as a bad thing. It's that there's something else that's even better that we can do and become what I call a new factory entrepreneur. And so I think it's very exciting. So, so new factory thinking is what we're trying to develop here. And this is my terminology. I wrote a book called The New Factory Thinker a few years ago. A lot of you have read it. I've given hundreds of presentations about this. And every time I talk about it, it seems that there's even more and more to say about this way of thinking. We feel it's a new and better way to be a successful entrepreneur. And what I've done in the last few weeks is just think as deeply as I can about what are the fundamental differences between being an old factory entrepreneur and being a new factory entrepreneur. So I'm going to explain to you how you can become that kind of entrepreneur and really open up the potential, your full potential, so that the way you're thinking is not getting in your way. Okay. So let me get right into it here. So think about new factory thinking is that it's going to help you do these things. So why would you even bother listening to me here? Well, there's 4 major benefits and dozens of other ones, but these are kind of my top 4 anyway. One is it's going to help you attract more customers. So not just any old customers, though, like the really ideal ones that you'd really love to work with. The second thing, it has the potential to help you increase your income dramatically. I like to think of it as 11 times. I can get into why I use the word 11 in a minute, but the number 11 in a minute. But also work 50% less. So that means obviously, if you're keeping track even just by how much you make per hour when you're working, you'd be making a lot more and working a lot less. So you'd be significantly, making more per hour. Let's think of it that way if you want to. Um, the other thing is it's going to help you make passive income. So the thing about passive income, it takes 0 hours to make that, right? So that's even better, right? And the other thing, which for me is very good, is because you're not tied down like you used to be. You can work anywhere. So wherever you want to go, you want to travel, you want to work at home, you want to, you know, wherever you want to go, you can do exactly what you're used to do in an office. And I know a lot of us have gotten used to working remotely, but this is really taking that even further. Okay, just to work anywhere. And actually, I just got the Vision Pro, Apple Vision Pro headset, so I've been playing around with it for the last week. Um, and it's interesting because that's another place to work. Okay. It's like a virtual reality environment to work. So that I can work there as well. So that's another whole other presentation that I'll do once I get my act together on how that all works. But it's been pretty interesting week. Now, as I said, old factory thinking, which I'll explain in a minute what that looks like. It really does limit your opportunities. It's like you're kind of building walls around yourself. We tend to do that to kind of make ourselves feel safe, but it actually then becomes kind of a prison that we put ourselves in. So we ended up having sort of finite opportunities. Um, the new factory thinking expands your opportunities and it gives you infinite possibilities of things you can do. Which is really what you want when you have your own business, is at least have all of those infinite possibilities. Of course, then you have to choose which ones you want to pursue, but at least you have lots of options there. Whereas an old factory, you don't. And that's definitely not helpful when you have your own business. There's just no way. So, so I had one client that I worked on with this, and it really did transform his thinking, you know. And then he could see all these possibilities. And then he called me up one day and he said, you know, I got a bone to pick with you. And I said, what is that? And he says, well, I couldn't sleep last night, so I'm really exhausted right now. And I said, okay. And he said, the reason is because I just kept thinking of all the infinite possibilities I have now that I didn't see before. And I couldn't sleep because I was so excited. I said, well, I guess that's a good problem. We'll have to work on your sleep somehow. But he was very excited about this idea that now he had all these infinite possibilities that were available to him because he had changed his way of thinking. Okay. And all those walls that he had built around himself that he didn't even know he had built around himself were now gone. So he was very excited about the idea of infinity. And actually, that's where it kind of came from. This idea of the infinite idea was from him. Now, one of the reasons why old factory thinking um, is limiting is that when we're in that mode, we're defending the status quo. Okay. And typically, what we're thinking about is, well, what is successful today? What am I doing today that's successful? And I'm just going to keep doing that. All right. Um, I've told a lot of you many times about that I worked with Kodak, and I took a digital camera to the president of Kodak, and I said, "What do you think? What do you think of this digital camera?" This was 1995, and he said, "No, that'll never work. You know, um, people love film. They're never going to give up film. There's no way this digital thing's going to work." And I was just kind of totally shocked when he said that. And but he was focusing on what was successful today, right? He looked at this digital camera and said, "Well, it's too expensive. It doesn't not very good." And I said, "But that's not what the future looks like, right?" So new factory thinking, when we use it, we really embrace the future. Like we're not just excited about the future. We're actually inventing the future, right? And we're thinking about, well, what will be successful tomorrow, right? So this is why, uh, I went out and paid frankly, a lot of money for this Apple Vision Pro because I thought about it for a minute. I thought, should I get it? I mean, it's like Canadian dollars, like $6,000, right? And I thought, should I get it? And then I thought, wait a minute, that's old new factory thinking tells me get it because you need to find out what this is all about, right? So I have already thought about a lot about what this will do to change the world, and how it will change what will be successful tomorrow from today, right? So in that moment, I said, right, embrace the future. This is something that's coming, um, and that's how I've always wanted to be, and my tendency is sometimes not to do that. So you always have to work on this, right? It's not something you just learn and then you do. It's like a practice. Um, so most people are very stuck on what is successful today. And we want to milk that for as much as we can, actually. And I truly mean it. Like if something's successful today, definitely go for it, right? And just make as much money as you can. But have an eye on the fact that that won't last. Okay. Because that's the thing I've always said to my folks that I work with here, my company, is I say, this is great, like things are going great right now, and it isn't going to last. All right. It isn't going to last. And I always remember from Sunday school, my mother was a Sunday school teacher. So I had to go to Sunday school, obviously, and we learned about that idea of like there were 7 years of plenty, and then there would be 7 years of not plenty, um, and and it was like that really stuck in my mind, I guess, from a young age. And it was like, okay, what's successful today? It's successful today, but what does the future hold? Now that was a kind of a negative thing, but in a way, but it was to say, don't forget that nothing lasts forever, right? So what will be the next thing? What would be the most successful thing going into the future, right? What's next? Now, so what is old factory thinking? Now, I wrote a whole book about this, so there's a lot about it. Um, and there's like many, many characteristics of this, but this is the way that we've been thinking about business now for 250 years. So it started with the Industrial Revolution, but even before that, actually, but when the Industrial Revolution really ramped it up because we started creating factories, right? So most businesses were based on some kind of product or service, right? So you said, okay, what's my business? Or somebody would ask you, what's your business? And you'd say, well, I make hammers. I have a factory and we make hammers. And hey, you want to buy a hammer? That's what I do, right? So, or it could be some kind of service, right? Like um, you know, we do physiotherapy, or, we're a lawyer or something, right? So we have this definition of our business that is based on a product. And that's been the way we've done it now for, like I say, 300 years. So it's just at a certain point, it just seems like that's the normal way to think about having a business, right? Um, Now, because of that, we're very competitive typically because there's other people that we look around and say, well, they're also selling hammers too. So now I'm in a battle with those hammer people, and I got to beat them out, right? So we're feeling very competitive, and that was kind of the idea, like competition is good, and the best rises to the top and everything, and on a certain degree, I agree with all of that too, right? Um, but there's an issue there, and then the third thing is that the business is weighed down by a lot of physical operations and fixed overhead. So we kind of build this whole factory around our hammer, um, and we as we get bigger, we get more overhead, we get more operations, and it's actually kind of makes it even harder to break out of that way of thinking because we've invested so much in it. Um, Making the hammer. So that's what was going on with Kodak, right? Like it was so obvious that digital photography was going to be a thing, um, but they didn't want to see it because they had these huge factories that were all chemical plants basically to make all this film. So if they looked at that and went, well, okay, well, I don't want to think about digital because it doesn't use any of these operational assets at all, and so I don't want to think about it because it was the same thing that happened with Blockbuster, right? So streaming comes along and there's no video store. So Blockbuster's like, what's our business? Our business is renting out videos and um, and all these stores, right? So when they saw streaming and Netflix say, hey, you want to buy our business? They went, well, we don't want to buy that because we have all these stores, right? So we were kind of doubling down on our denial of the future because we're caught up in all of this stuff, right? So, and that can happen in your life too. You can get all this stuff around you, and you want to go do something else, but you can't because you got all this stuff you got to take care of. It's kind of like you're kind of a slave of your furniture, right? Like you've got so much furniture, you can't do anything new because, well, you got all this furniture. What are you going to do with all the furniture if you do this new thing? So watch out for that too in your regular life here. So those are just the three things. Now, the problem is um, with new factory thinking. Well, I guess the benefit of it is that it has sake of simplicity. We have a business, it's hammers, right? But the problem is, of course, that the world keeps changing. So I'll talk more about in a minute. Um, and because it keeps changing, that makes our product very vulnerable, right? Because maybe things are going along great right now. We're selling hammers, it's successful today. That's great. But maybe a year from now, nobody wants any more hammers because maybe the technology changes, or people just have enough hammers, or there's competition, and that brings down the price, and so it doesn't make it particularly good business anymore, um, and so on. It's just a really this is why it's very restrictive, because you're just thinking, all I am is this business that's about hammers, and there's a lot of threats to it. So even though the more you try to double down, the more that the world kind of seems threatening, right? So then you double down even more. So, um, but of course, what it really does is it stops you from imagining other things that you could do, right? So if you went out into the marketplace and started finding out that people want screwdrivers, it'd say, well, that's fine, but that's not what I do. And that's the typical response, okay? That's not what I do. I do hammers. So even though now the world wants screwdrivers, we double down on the hammers. We think, well, that's just stupid. People shouldn't really use screwdrivers. They need hammers. And yet, of course, what should you do? And I'll talk about that in a minute. Um, but we're like, no, no, no. I'm going to stick to this. So most businesses that go out of business, once we have the startups, that's one thing. But then there's a lot of businesses that go out of business who've been around a long time, and primarily they go around a long time, or they go out of business because they've been around a long time because they don't evolve, right? They just keep doing hammers, and then one day nobody wants them and they close up. And that's sort of why we have the Rust Belt, right? All these factories just shut down because people no longer needed what were being made in those factories, and the factories never evolved, right? So that was a really bad thing that happened. Now, new factory thinking um, is a much better way to go, and this isn't really something I invented. It's just kind of what I discovered actually works better. Okay, and in the world that we're in now, so the internet really changed everything. And I won't go into all the reasons that is. We're all very familiar about how the internet really changed almost everything in the world, and yet we kept using the same thinking even though the world had changed, right? So I started realizing, well, actually, there are people and companies that are using different thinking that is much more powerful and effective nowadays. Okay, so the first element of it is that instead of basing our business on a product or service, which can be successful today and not successful tomorrow, we base our business on an idea, and I call it a big idea, but it is at its core just an idea. Okay, so an idea could be, well, we help people be 10 times more successful. That's the idea of the business. Or we help people be 10 times happier, or I just use 10 times to make it a lot. So 10 times healthier, 10 times um, have 10 times better relationships, right? Personal relationships or business relationships. I help them be 10 times more efficient. So whatever you want to come up with, right? So I'm trying to help you be 10 times more successful. That's my business, basically. right? Now, the key of that is that it's not a product or service, so it can't really ever go out of date, right? It's like if I think maybe 20 years from now, if I'm still able to do this, people are still going to want to be 10 times more successful. So it's future proof, right? As an idea for a business. Now, in 20 years from now, the way I'm doing that would probably be a lot different, right? I'll probably be in virtual reality using AI and God knows what else is going to be going on in 20 years. But I'm still helping people be 10 times more successful. So I'm always, that anchor is still there. So there's no reason for me to go out of business, right? So what we want to do then is say, yeah, our business is based on an idea. We're trying to help people do, and and I can create all kinds of products or services from that. If new technology comes along, I can use that to do that. So this is a much more powerful thing. So when I do my sessions with people, the first thing I do with them, I say, who are you trying to help, and what's the big thing you're going to try to help them do, right? Oh, we're going to try to help them make 10 times more money. Okay. Or we're going to help them save 10 times more money, or we're going to help them, you know, um, enjoy their holidays 10 times more. Like whatever it is, it's an idea. Okay. Now, the second thing is we're getting rid of this idea that we're in a particular product category or industry. Okay. So we act as a value hub. And this is kind of the hardest part for people to get because we're so conditioned around this idea that our business is the product and our product is the business. So we do hammers, right? And I say, well, why are you just doing hammers? Well, because that's our business. I go, but what about the screwdrivers? Well, we don't do screwdrivers. I go, why not? Well, because we just don't do it. Okay. It's like, okay. But everybody wants to buy those, And they said, well, that's not how I make my money. And I said, okay, so you're either in the business of making money by selling hammers or you're in the business of making money. Which is it going to be? Well, I want to be in the business of making money. Okay. Well, then maybe we should add on the screwdrivers. Now, right away, people start objecting, right? Well, you're going to lose your focus now, right? You don't know anything about screwdrivers. What are you going to start a screwdriver company now? Like, what are you doing? I said, no, we're going to collaborate with someone that makes screwdrivers because we're now a hub. Like, we're not trying to do everything, but we could be a company that provides everything. All right. And that's what Amazon is, right? Like they started off as books, right? Because maybe that's all the vision he had. But then all of a sudden you realize, well, we could sell people anything. We're really just a department store, right? So Jeff Bezos really just acts as a hub between the buyers and the sellers. And that's what we can all do. And so you become incredibly useful now to your customers because they can just come to you and get everything, right? And why not, right? So this is, of course, what Apple did, right? They started with computers, and then they started selling music, and then phones, and then iPads, and watches, and credit card, and movies, and the Vision Pro headset. Okay, and so they're a value hub. So I'm like surrounded by Apple's value hub, and it's been incredibly helpful to me, and much more helpful to me than if they had just stuck with the computers. So this is an attitude, right? It's like the attitude is, well, I can just help people in any way I want, any way they want. I don't have to be in a particular industry. I don't have to be in a particular category. And like I say, this is the hardest one to get because it flies in the face of all conventional wisdom that you shouldn't do that. But you look at the biggest companies in the world now, and they all do that. So maybe the conventional wisdom isn't the wisdom that we should be using anymore. Okay. So this is the infinite part because you could do infinitely anything. And what you're doing today might not be what you're doing tomorrow, right? And this is really what's going to happen to all of us anyway, because with AI and everything else that's going on, it's going to force us to change. And we're going to find ourselves a few years from now doing things that we never imagined doing and maybe quite different than what we were doing. But it may still be in the aid of that idea that we had. All right. So this is why it just totally frees you up now. You don't have to worry about what's going on. You can say, "Wow, what's going on? What are the opportunities to help people more with what's going on?" So that there's no more threats. And the collaborative part is that you go to someone, say, has a um, screwdriver company, and say, "Listen, I've got all these relationships, customers. I'm selling hammers already, but they also need screwdrivers. Can I help you sell your screwdrivers? And give me a commission for that, right?" And suddenly you're making passive income from that. So value hub is really, really important. The third thing is that you have virtual operations. So you don't want to be tied down to any particular um, fixed overhead as much as possible. You want it all to be flexible, right? So I figured that out at a certain point. After a bit of pain, I had a photocopier. It was like $1,000 a month lease. It was a really high-end color photocopier, did a million things. But at a certain point, people didn't need that from me as much. Like I was doing all these booklets and things. It's like everything went digital. And I thought they sometimes want it, but not enough to justify it. So I just said, okay, well, I'll go to a company that has one of those machines and I'll just use their machine when I need that particular thing done, which was a UPS store around the corner. And I let them have the overhead and the fixed equipment. And I just used that equipment when I needed it. That doesn't mean you wouldn't have, virtually nothing, but you could, right? And I'm using the Apple Vision Pro headset. So I don't know if you know much about it, but when you put it on, you can basically just bring up all your computer screens, all your apps and everything. You can have them anywhere. Like I could be sitting out in my backyard. I could be lying on my back in bed. I could be in any room in the building, anywhere I want to be. And all my computer stuff is there. I have no screens. I think eventually no computer will be needed either that I would connect to because it would just be the computer itself. But at that point, we don't have all that stuff. So that would be like the ultimate thing. You don't even have any computer or anything. Okay, you don't have screens or anything. You're just using all this stuff in a virtual environment. That's totally coming. I could totally see that happening. Because if you think about that Vision Pro headset, $6,000, but if you didn't actually need to have any of this other computer equipment, then actually it would be cheaper than the normal way of doing computing, right? Like basically now I don't even need a TV set, right? I've got like a $3,000 TV set, right? And yet I've been watching now movies with the Vision Pro headset. That's like being in an IMAX theater, and I could be anywhere watching it, and there's no screen except in this virtual environment. So I've eliminated that too. Okay, so as the future goes on, it'll get to the point where literally we have almost zero fixed operations, like physical operations, and all the overhead will be more or less flexible, which means that we only use overhead when we're making money. So this is so much better way to think about a business. You still have options to say, no, I still want to have a store. I still want to have an office. I still want to have some physical things. Fine. But now you've got options. You can say, well, and also to say, you don't have to have that. You don't have to have that, right? You could just not have any of that. And maybe that would be better. So you got options. Now, okay, so now we have these two ways of thinking. It's like there's two sides of our brain, okay? We have old factory thinking, which can be very powerful and just keep trying to drag you back into that thinking because that's how we've been conditioned. But then we have this new factory thinking, which is a whole different way. And this is just a start, an introduction to that. All these sessions that we'll have coming up, all the books I've written that you might want to read, all the videos I've done are really talking about all the in great detail about new factory thinking. Okay, so you start going, okay, maybe that is a better way to go, and I want to learn about it and learn about it, but how do I actually actualize that? Okay, and the way you actualize it is by having two things going on at once. Okay. So we're going to have our old factory. We're going to keep running that. So I'm not telling you to change anything, actually. Okay. We're not changing anything. Nobody wants to change anything. But we're going to add something. And we like to add things, right? So we like to add things. So we're going to add something. So we're going to keep our old factory, and then we're going to add a new factory. And what we're going to do is we're going to spend 89% of our time on the old factory and 11% of our time on the new factory. Okay. And so when I built this business, this current iteration of it, it was an idea I had. Okay. The big idea company was an idea I had. But I was running this old factory, which was Bishop Communications. Okay. And so I said, what am I going to do? So what I did was I went across the street to Starbucks and I spent about 11% of my time, okay, working on that new thing. And then I'd go back to, I started calling it the salt mine. I'd go back there and I would work there. And I had to figure out how to make that more efficient because I had to find 11% time to do that. So that was good. I made that company more efficient. And then I had more time and then increasingly more time to work on the new factory. And I said to myself, well, I'm doing this because that's the future. That's the future I want. And I can't get stuck in the present here. I got to get my thing I want in the future. So I got to spend that 11% of the time. Okay. So we just have these two things. So just imagine Kodak if they had said, okay, well, we're going to keep running their old factory, making the film, because that's what we do, but we're going to open up Kodak Digital, and it's just going to be a small little thing, and we're going to start working on that. Okay, and put 11% of our resources towards digital. They would be the world leaders in it now, by far. You know, and it would be a completely different kind of company, but it would be a very successful one, right? It ain't nothing now, right? That's crazy. So what we do then is because we've got this methodology, we're not threatening the present or anything. It allows us to think big. We can imagine something really big happening here. Just, you know, it's not threatening anything. We're just thinking about this other thing. So we can just think as big as we want, right? Big, 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 as big as you want. And if you don't want super big company, it doesn't matter, but it could be big in the sense of the amount of impact you have in people, or big in the sense of what you'd be able to do yourself, the things you'd be able to do that you would love doing. You can just imagine that without feeling that it's impossible or it's going to screw up what you're doing right now or anything, right? But then we know, okay, and then we're going to start small and we're going to start now on it. We're not going to wait, right? There's no reason to wait because we're not actually spending a lot of time on it. So if you have an idea of something you want to do in the future that would be better, then you go, okay, well, I'm going to start and do this one little thing. And I'm going to do it now. Just this one thing. Just take, take your mouse on your table desk and move it from the left to the right or something. Or, take a box and move it downstairs or something. Like whatever it would be. But it would be an action that would be moving it towards that new thing. Okay. And that's very exciting. It just did that one thing. So what I did is I went across the street to Starbucks and I got a little notepad out and I started writing down what the idea would be and how it would work and stuff. And I, by the time I was finished my cup of tea, I had a lot of ideas and I went back to the old factory to work. And then I just kept doing that, right? But I started right away. There's no point thinking about it too much. At a certain point, just do something. Now, that's the thinking, okay? And the method. So we have the old factory, new factory. Now there's these practical pillars of a new factory that have proven to work incredibly well. So there's just these three pillars. And the first one is that you want to meet lots of people. So you create a free network community. Just like this is a free network community, you would create a free network community. Okay. So instead of just saying, I'm going to go out and find customers one at a time, like a salesperson would, I'm going to say, no, I have this community. People can join the community. And that's how it all starts. That's how all the relationships with new people start. You invite them into the community. Okay. And so all the clients that I have that have done this, created their community, would never go back to marketing any other way. They all have a community, and they're all a little different as far as how often they have meetings and how they organize it, but it's a community that people can join. The second thing is you have these premium membership programs, okay? And the members go through an advanced process with you, all right? So it's like you'd say, well, on the basic level, I'm a plumber, and on the more advanced level, old factory plumber, new factory architect, and I'm going to take them through my architectural process to help them design their house or whatever, okay? That would be the example of, and that person that does that with me would be a member, okay? And they'd have membership consciousness, and it would be a premium service, and I would charge more for that than I would charge for my basic old factory product or service. Okay, so if you had the hammers, it'd say, okay, well, I have the hammers and I have a network community that building contractors can join because I'm trying to help them be 10 times more successful as building contractors. And then we have this membership program, we have different levels of it, and they go through a special process that helps them take their building contracting company up to a higher level. And I actually have somebody that worked with building contractors and did that exact thing, and it worked incredibly well, and he wouldn't do it any other way. And then the third thing is the member store. And that's I call that the value hub. That's the value hub I was talking about. That's how we actually actualize that. So the member store means that there's all these products and services in there. So that's where the screwdrivers go. Okay. So you say to the members, okay, well, you can buy our hammers, but we also have the store where you can buy screwdrivers and ladders and car leases and insurance and anything that you would need to be more successful as a building contractor. And all of those resources would be provided by other companies where you're helping make the transaction and then you're making money from that, right? So that's really ultimately, that's like you having the Apple store, right, in your company. Oh, that's the same screen. Okay, so that's the structure of it, right? So network, membership, store, member program. So now, as I mentioned, it's all about an idea when you have a new factory. And when you're a new factory thinker, your business is all about an idea, okay? The products and services are second in the thinking. So, so it's all built around a big idea, and it's designed to serve an ideal customer. So there's some sort of niche that you have decided to focus on, right? And the niche could be something very specific, like you work with the owners of construction companies. That could be like that. Or it could be more general, like we work with women, or we work with women basketball players. So whatever you want, but you decide what it is. So I work with entrepreneurs. I work with ambitious entrepreneurs who want to get their business to the next level. Like they're really ambitious, that way. And they also have good intentions. So that's mine. It doesn't matter what industry they're in my case. So that's my ideal customer. So who are your ideal customers that you would like to get to have in this? And that's part of the idea, because you tell people that, right? Say, well, I work with, female basketball players that want to play in the Olympics. That's who I coach, The next thing is that the idea is based on a problem that you're solving. So you're solving a problem that no one's helping them with, okay? So in my case, the problem is the restrictive nature of old factory thinking. That's the problem I'm helping people solve. No one else is helping people solve that one, okay? No one else identified that. No one else has figured out that that's a problem. I figured that out, and I help people see that it is, and then help them solve that problem. So we solve problem. The other thing is it helps them become something new, better, and different. So that's ultimately what the new factory does for every customer, is to try to help them become something new, better, and different from what they are now. So it is very future oriented. It's transformative. So I'm helping people go from being old factory thinkers to new factory thinkers, from having an old factory to running a new factory, and then all the benefits of that, right? So what does that look like for you, right? Now, the beauty of this is that it doesn't do away with anything you're doing now. As a matter of fact, it can help you sell more of what you're doing now. So you'll get that immediate benefit from it because this is better marketing, right? It's just going to help you meet more people. It's going to be able to communicate a more higher level value proposition. It's going to make them want to do it, right? And then you can sell them you can sell them your hammer. You know, when I started this big idea company, it generated unbelievable amounts of business for my old factory. So everybody in the old factory thought it was great that I was doing this, right? So there was a lot of support for it because it was getting business for the old factory, right? Now, what about technology? We talk a lot about technology in this program, and because it's so important, right? That the new technology changes everything, gives you lots of new tools to work with, and so on. How do you manage it though? So one of the things that AI is kind of running into right now, which was inevitable, I knew it would come, is you're going to say, well, it's great, but what do you use it for? I've been playing around with it, but what do you use it for, right? So it was like a solution looking for a problem. But we don't have that issue because we're new factory thinkers. We have clear target, ideal customer we're trying to help. There's a big problem we're trying to help them with. There's something we're trying to help them become. So now we look at the technology and go, well, how can I use it to do that, right? So now the technology has a purpose. So one of the first thing you can use it for is to make your old factory more efficient so you can find that 11% extra time, okay? So that's certainly what I've done. I've been able to find much more than 11% efficiency in running my business. Like I was talking about the book, writing these books from the videos. If I had tried to do that in the old days, it would have taken forever. Now it takes 10 minutes to do. Um, so so it's making that side of my old factory more efficient, right? So then the other thing is that use the new technology to provide new kinds of value. So what could you use it for? In AI, for example. So in our case, we've been helping our clients make videos using AI. So where before it wasn't something that was doable. Make a video about someone's big idea would take month, right? Cost $10,000, and frankly, it wouldn't be worth it. So now we can make a video in 20 minutes from start to finish, and they're pretty good, right? Like if you spent the month, you could probably get a better video, but it would only be fractionally better. So these videos that we make are excellent, and they only take 20 minutes, and they don't cost anything really. So that's new kinds of value that we're able to provide. So what could you do? And that really takes you into all kinds of places, right? Now, the key here with any new technology like AI is to help your customers get a better results using less resources. So, something better, like maybe not even possible before, using less resources, less money, less time, less effort, less raw materials, right? That's what you want to be using the technology for. And that's why AI is going to be so incredible once we get through this initial bubble and people start to use it for something useful, right? It was just the same thing happened with the internet. People were blah, blah, blah about the internet in the 90s. And I'm going, that's all a bunch of nonsense. But this is just the bubble. And then once we get past the bubble, then people go, now, but they actually use it. The real use of it is this, right? So then we got into using the internet in a lot of very useful ways, but that weren't nonsense. Okay, so that's a way to think about technology in the framework of new factory thinking. Now, the other issue here is also why. Why should I do all this anyway? It does sound like a lot of work. It sounds like, oh my God, why do I want to do all that? It's the middle of the summer, well, I'm not that ambitious or whatever. Well, it's sort of an imperative. Okay, that you reinvent yourself continuously, because if you don't, you're going to end up like Kodak. You're going to end up a dinosaur. Like that's all there is to it. And that's typically what happens because people don't really have any way to reinvent themselves. So I'm saying, yeah, we have that 11% new factory, right? Why would I do that? Well, one is your customers are changing, right? So, so back in the day, we used to do people newsletters for them. We used to do email newsletters. We used to do websites and stuff, and those were popular back then. But I could see that it was going to become less and less popular. Like it had its day, right? Um, and so your customers are changing. What they want will change, right? And so they want what you have now, but tomorrow they might not want it anymore. So think of the new factory as like an insurance policy that you buy to protect yourself against that, right? Which you all know is inevitable, right? Um, New technology keeps changing everything. It changes how business is done. It's changed how customers interact with companies. It changes with what customers want. It changes the whole framework of the competitive marketplace. Um, we've seen that all with the internet, right? So AI will be even bigger impact than that ultimately. Um, so it changes everything. So therefore, we got to keep changing too. The other thing is, and I think this is the most important one, is you're always changing and evolving. So what you did in the past, like I don't think I'd want to do a website now. I don't think that would be interesting to me. I wouldn't feel like, that's something I did back then. It was kind of interesting back then, but it's not interesting now. I have much more interesting things I want to do with people. So I'm evolving. So, but I've seen people get stuck, right? They were selling hot dogs. It was kind of interesting setting up the hot dog business. They got it all running. They got it really operating really well. They got the mustard figured out, right? All that. And okay, that was very interesting 20 years ago. But now it's like, kind of boring. And once you get bored, that's deadly when you're an entrepreneur, right? Because as soon as you're bored, then you're projecting boredom, and therefore your customers get bored with you. So no good, right? So we have a lot more that we can do. We have a lot more potential. We can be gourmet chefs. Okay. So we can evolve into being gourmet chefs. Even though we're really good at the hot dogs, maybe it's time to move on from that. Give it to someone else to do. You don't have to sell the business or anything, but maybe someone else will run the hot dog stand while you go and do your gourmet chef work, which is what the world needs from you. That's what you're capable of doing. The world doesn't need you to do another hot dog, right? So this is the importance of reinvention, and it's something that we haven't been taught enough to do. We hear about it all the time, innovation, 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 but very few people do it because they really haven't understood why it's imperative to reinvent themselves, right? And so we haven't been encouraged to do that. As a matter of fact, most people won't encourage you to do that. They don't like to see you changing and evolving and moving on to the next step. They want you to stay where you are because that seems threatening to them. So you need to hang around with people that are into reinvention. This is why this community, I believe, is helpful that way, because we're all trying to do that, right? And so we've got our own little bubble here that we can help each other, and the rest of the world can take care of itself, right? So the key about new factory thinking is it gives you permission to reimagine everything. You see, so you're running a taxi company, and you're kind of caught up in the paradigm of that, right? How it all works. And then you go, okay, well, I'm going to think about my new factory. So I'm going to go and someplace and do that and think about that and think, well, what's different now? Oh, there's smartphones and there's apps and stuff. Well, how could taxi be different? Let's reimagine that, right? And you might have thought of it. You might have thought of Uber, because you gave yourself permission to reimagine everything. And the only way that you can reimagine everything is that you have to get yourself out of the old way of thinking, right? Because you can't create something new if you use the thinking that created the old. Like it just doesn't work, right? You need new thinking to create the new. And when you have that and permission to do that, then you can reimagine everything, which possibly could lead to a really, really big idea. And that's what can be so exciting about it, right? Um, and that big idea could help you make more money, could help you find more customers, could help you work less, have the kind of life you want, um, do new exciting things, keep yourself young. you know, just think about it. Okay, and it really could help you become the entrepreneur you were meant to be. Um, like one of the things that I've seen as a trajectory with entrepreneurs, people start off as an entrepreneur. Like maybe they quit a job, they have an idea, they start a business, they get the business going, it goes really well because they work really hard. They build all this structure around their business, and then that structure becomes these walls around which they can't get out, and they get stuck. And then they become a manager and a defender of that structure. And all the opportunity is outside those walls. It's all outside there. It's not in there anymore, but we're hiding in there. And we get very defensive. And I felt that so many times as a tendency in my business. I go, all the opportunities out there. It's not in here, right? So on all these walls are not helping me get to that opportunity. So I need to go out and start thinking of a new factory, right? The new factory is where the opportunities are, right? And I don't, and the world does not need me to be a manager of an old factory. So how do you get started with this? Okay. What would be a practical way? So what we want to do is take that 11% time and spend it in some kind of new space. That's the best thing to do. Even if it's just a different place in your office or a different place in your home, but you sit down and you go, okay, I'm going to think about this in a different spot. So that's kind of key to this, actually. So when you're in a different spot. So if it is going to the Starbucks or the park or the library or someone else's office or the basement or wherever you want to go, out in the backyard, go and work on it out there, right? And I say maybe a little notebook or something would be good to have with you when you do that. What you want to do is think in the future, who do I really want to help? Like that's the first question. Who do I really want to help? Not who would be the one that would make me the most money even. That's a different question. It's who do I really want to help? What would I find the most satisfying to work with, people to work with, or companies? And then you say, well, what would my gourmet meal look like? What would my gourmet restaurant look like? What is that? So it's not only just different, it's also better. It's a more advanced, more premium thing. Like that's what you want to, because that's motivating, right? Like, okay, I'm selling hot dogs, that's fine, but I'm not going to open up a hamburger place. I'm going to open up a gourmet restaurant. What would that look like, right? And then you want to really start thinking about and feeling it deeply. Like, what would it be like to be a gourmet chef? And you go, well, it'd be amazing. That'd be incredible. And you really need to get in touch with that, because otherwise you'll get sucked back into the old factory. That's the saddest thing of all, right? There's was it the book when it's called Flowers for Algernon, and so this fellow who was kind of in a comatose state or whatever, and then he had an awakening. And there was the other movie, The Awakenings. Remember that one? Anyway, so he got really smart, okay, and then at the end he lost all those capabilities and went back to being relatively infantile, and so that was kind of blew my mind when I saw that when I was a kid, that movie. And so this is the same thing I've seen. Like people, they kind of take a foray into being the gourmet chef, and then they go, oh, I don't know, and then they go back to old factory and they're stuck selling hot dogs again. They had a chance, that one moment, that brief moment where they could have done it. So I don't want that to happen. So you want to be really clear. I got to get out of here, out of this jail, and get into having my gourmet business, right? Everyone has this issue. Like, it's such a common thing because we really do like the status quo. We get comfortable there, but it may actually be sucking the life out of you, right? So you go, okay, I really got to get out of here. I need a plan to do that. I need to start working on it. It's a fairly big issue. The other thing is, and a lot of you have done this already, but if you haven't, you could do this with me. It's the big idea conversation. So I have a session you can do with me if you want. There's no cost to it, 60 minutes, and I can help you develop your big idea. So if you're watching this on YouTube or something, you can schedule a session with me. There's a link just in the description of the video that'll give you a way to connect with me and book a time with me directly in my calendar, and you can have that session. And we're going to develop your big idea. We're going to think about what that is. So I'll take you through this new factory thinking. We're going to develop a vision for your new factory, and we're going to start making a game plan. And if that sounds like a lot to get done in 60 minutes, it is, because we actually do it. It's a process we've been doing for 25 years, and it's very powerful. And it really kickstarts your new factory thinking and helps you get going with your new factory. So, okay, so like I say, there's no cost to do that. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in, as long as you have your own business, then we'd love to have that session with you.